it's Delina with Arizona Desert Gems, and today I was thinking about designing with handmade headpins like these fancy handmade headpins, and 3 different ways that you can use them in your designs. So you have the same shape, so I made 6 headpins today so that we can make 3 sets of earrings. I did make the earrings, the ear wires in the same color, because I thought it would be really nice to have a cohesive fall design. So this was kind of my autumn palette today with 3 different agate beads and some accent beads here. I used the Parawire 20 gauge brown wire. I like Parawire for a couple of reasons. It comes in a lot of different colors and it is pretty permanently coated unless you are scratching it with your tools. So for the most part, the color is going to stay on and it's not going to rub off. If you don't like the look of the colored ear wires or you're concerned about allergies, you can absolutely use either silver, sterling silver, or other hypoallergenic metals with that. But if you don't have those concerns, I do think it looks nice to have the same color ear wire. You can always make your own shapes and your own ear wires, or you can purchase them from me in my Etsy shop with the link below. So let's get started on the first variation. This is probably the most common one. This is beads on one head pin directly to the ear wire. And that's probably, like I said, the most common single element design that you're going to see. This is a tight closed design right here at that joint where the head pin starts to go up and you'll be putting your bead on. So with designs that are going to have a more open wire wrap design down here, you may have to think about the size of this bead, but this is going to sit pretty nicely right on that and not move around. It's not going to slide down because, again, it's very tight. But on other open designs, you might have to think about that more for sure. Now, think about what is it that you want to feature. Do you want to feature the head pin design itself, or do you want to have something like this that's a little more integrated? Now I'm going to take one of these small orange beads, and I think they're mother of pearl. I think they're a shell. And then, so here we have a much more integrated design with the head pin being featured, but it's not completely separate. If you wanted to feature the head pin more, you could do something like this and use the smaller beads. Let's put 3 of these on here. And there you have a very different look, very much more featured with the design of the head pin itself. So you can see these 2 looks side by side. Again, this is a single element design. So for today, I decided I wanted to do the more integrated look. So I'm just going to take my flush cutters and I'm measuring just by the size of my hand. If I was working off the wire, which I normally do to save waste, I would just be measuring it directly from the wire. I'd put my beads on, make my head pin, and then cut my wire here. When I make head pins to order, I make them 2 inches long because I never know exactly what my customers are going to want. Now I want this to be facing forward, and I have my ear wire with a vertical loop. So this loop is going to need to be facing the front of the head pin. So holding it the direction that I want, bending it over the bead, taking my round nose pliers and making that loop. Always adjusting, just get it exactly how you like it, nice and straight. Okay, and then on your ear wires, make sure that you're moving them towards the side rather than bending them open. Attach your earring And there's our first earring made. For the second way that you can use the head pins, we're going to have more of a straight silhouette rather than that rounded bead component look. So for this one, we're not actually going to put any beads on the head pins, but we're going to make nice wire wrap loops with these. Now, you don't have to make wire wrap loops if you don't want to, but because they're a single component, I thought it might look a little bit nicer. And let's actually be thorough about this and mark our pliers so that both ones will have the same amount. Let's give it a nice amount of striping, and we're just going to mark on the pliers right there. Don't worry, Sharpie always comes off. It's not a problem. So I'm marking where I want to bend. You can see I have another mark there from another project, but I'm marking where I want to bend this. And so I'm bending it over. I'm going to roll it with my pliers, my round nose, come around with my loop. Now, some people like to hold it just like this and keep going, which is what I do. Other people will switch to nylon jaw pliers, like this, to hold the loop in place. And then just moving this around, getting it all the way snugged up. And I like to cut it so that the wire is not in the front, but it's in the back. And giving it a little bit of a squish. Okay, there's our first component made. And then, as I mentioned, I like working off the wires, so I have these little seed beads. When you're doing combinations and making components, remember that the eye loves to see odd numbers for some reason. We like 3s, we like 5s, much better than even numbers. So, like I said, this one's not going to be a wire wrap loop. I'm just going to make the loop here. Slide my beads down from the wire. Cut my measurement. This one, I'm thinking ahead already. I may need 2 different sides of the loop, but for right now, I'm just going to make the loops facing the same direction. And this is a great example. You can see how I cut it way too long. So about the length that it is too long is about how much I cut off. And then I just pick up where I left off and re-wrapping it. Okay, let's see how this one goes together here. We're gonna open up the top, put on our bead, and close the loop, making sure it's straight. Now, as I look down here, I notice I do need this on the side, so I'm just gonna make sure that I have one loop facing towards me and one loop vertically, so one loop facing towards the side. Now, since that's the wrap loop, I'm gonna open this one, slide this on, and there's our second earring, nice and dangly, lots of movement, lots of swing to it, and a very straight kind of profile. And for our third design, we're going to make a very different silhouette with the focal up at the top, and that's why I've chosen these really large beads. And so it's going to have a nice top shape with a little tiny something extra at the bottom. So just like we did before, I'm choosing not to make a wrap loop on these because this agate is already so large that I don't want to add extra focal point up here. I want to keep the focal point right here. So just as we did before, kind of measuring it as to where you normally make your loops. We want the bead horizontal, the loop horizontal to the design. So bending it over. And making your loop. Still a little bit bigger than I like, so let's trim some. There we go. Now, you could stop here and just put the head pins on, right like that, and that would be similar to our first design, a single element design. But I'd like to add something a little extra at the bottom because we do have this wonderful loop that's already pre-made. So working from my spool again. Now you could use a head pin, a nail head pin that you purchase, and that's fine. But today I decided I'm gonna go ahead and just work straight off the spool. This is gonna be the bottom, so I'm making the tiniest loop I can possibly make to keep that bead on there because I don't want the loop to be a big focal point. Again, giving myself a little bit of space here. Bending that over. Making a nice loop. And then we're just gonna attach it right to that bottom loop. Here we go. And then adding our head pin, our ear wire. Sorry about that. Making sure that this is the direction I want it to be in. Closing it up, fix it. All right, and so now we have the third way to use the head pin, which is to actually incorporate it into the middle of your design with a nice little tiny swinging dangle at the end. Our first design with a single component, beads right on the head pin. Then our second design with the head pin as its own unique component and the agate beads as a separate component up at top. And then lastly, the higher focal large agate beads on the head pins, and then using the head pins to actually dangle one more little special bead. Hope you enjoyed 3 ways to use fancy head pins. Like and subscribe, and happy creating.